Hello everyone. Tonight's talk series will be in Cantonese. So welcome everyone to the talk series of Loving the Land. This talk inaugurates a combination of in-house talks and dialogues being curated as part of our online series and marking the special occasion. It's the KFBG's 70th anniversary. And through this talk series on loving the land, we will learn how the legacy that started 70 years ago has evolved to respond to the challenges of today. And this talk today attracted nearly 300 audience, and mostly from Hong Kong this time. And maybe because today's topic is around Hong Kong agriculture. Then maybe that is why we mainly attracted the audience from Hong Kong, but we also have other audience from like mainland China, Taiwan, UK, etc. And Kadoorie Earth Programme is a program integrated with nature conservation, sustainable living, and holistic education. And after introducing KEP, and we will come back to today's talk. And we would like to introduce our guest speakers today. They are two head managers in Kadoorie Farm. And Tsz Lam was born to an ordinary peasant family. And he has engaged in the local organic agricultural sector for over 20 years. And now he's in charge of various production areas, including orchard, vegetable farms, tea plantation. And another guest speakers tonight is the head of conservation in Kadoorie Conservation China Program. So he's an expert in the conservation of amphibians, reptiles, and mammals in the Indo-Burma biodiversity hotspots. And he has published many papers and journals in this topic of conservation. As you know, both of them, even though they cover different topics, but it shared some similarities. First of all, each of them will give a 15 minutes presentation, and then they will have a dialogue. And after that, the dialogue between these two guest speakers, we will come to a Q&A session with our audience. And please type all your questions in the chat box during the Q&A section. And if you like, please turn on your camera so that we could be more interactive, and there will be recordings from this talks. And as I shared before, we have English and Putonghua simultaneous translation. And if you have any technical problems, please reach out to Jamie in our chat box. So now let's welcome Tsz Lam.
Hello, let me open my PowerPoint. Can you see it? Let me introduce myself. I am Tsz Lam from Regenerative Department. I'm happy to say a few words in this sharing. KEP is Kadoorie Earth Programme. So that's an Earth. Earth, many people interpret it as a planet, but Earth can also have the meaning of soil, because I do agricultural work and soil plays a great part in it. So I believe this will be a good opportunity to share more about this topic. I'll talk about Hong Kong agricultural issues and their relevance to our society. First, let's talk about Hong Kong agriculture history. So, Hong Kong people mainly grew rice in the past. So since Song Dynasty, rice production has been around. So rice growing has spanned over 1,000 years until 1960s to 1970s. So the key turning point is 1945. So after the war, there was an influx of immigrants from Chinese mainland into Hong Kong. So they flew their hometown due to political reasons or war reasons. Then they came to Hong Kong to grow crops. But then they didn't grow rice anymore. They grew vegetables. So this marked the start of the era of new territories vegetables. Because and Kadoorie at that time had been actively involved in agricultural aid and providing livestock and seeds for the farmers. This era of new territories vegetables lasted to 1980s. So at this time, Chinese mainland had become more politically stable. So there are more vegetables supplied from Chinese mainland. In Hong Kong, the agricultural production costs are greater than those in Chinese mainland. So in the 1980s, I would call this quite a dark age for Hong Kong agriculture. And many farmland sites have been left idle. If this situation lasted for over more years, I would say that Hong Kong agriculture may disappear. But then, interestingly, after the 2000s, there were some changes to Hong Kong agriculture. The first change was organic farming. And this was a major change because organic vegetables could be priced higher than all other vegetables. So this allowed the farmers to earn a living. And the second change was leisure agriculture. So many farms will run for leisure activity. So the people realized that farms are not only for crop production, but also for other purposes. And there's another change as well. In 2000s, many people engaged in farming work part-time, and there are even some people coming to engage in farm work from the urban areas. Because farming work is no longer a job to be inherited nowadays. So more people, they simply out of interest engage in agricultural work. It's not because of their own background. It's just because of their own will. So due to these various reasons, Hong Kong agriculture is still living and has been diversified. Although the scale of agriculture has diminished, there's a larger diversity. So in this picture, you can see traditional fruit trees, but there are new crops as well, such as cherry tomatoes and other Western vegetables. So at left's bottom, there's strawberries or even avocados. And at the right corner, there are mushrooms farming as well. Apart from crop diversification, we will see a more diversified distribution channels, like farmers markets every Sunday in Central. So because Hong Kong farmers are in the third generation now, so they have developed more sales channels. In the middle, you can see white turnips. This is a special sales scheme called Hong Kong Rob Go. Apart from turnips, they sell turnip cakes and other related products. In the left corner, you see pineapple and one pea. This is a special agricultural scheme in Mui Wo. Farmers, they sell and repackage pineapples. And there are small community projects like farmers markets as well. And so we'll see more locally based, district-based agriculture. Lychee War in a desolate village. And this has been going on for quite a few years. But then a few years ago, some people revitalized the village. And there are people outside the village coming to do agricultural work on part-time and to do farmers markets. So our agriculture has been undergoing diversification. But then let's talk about challenges to our agriculture and agricultural land. From this picture, you see on the left is relatively intact farmland, but that's not the case on the right. So the problem in Hong Kong is that some agricultural land is used for non-agricultural purposes. So let's look at the case in Tai Po Tien. It's not in Tai Po, it's in Ta Kwu land. You can see beautiful farmland size and of high ecological value. We'll visit that later. It's been under threat due to Northern Metropolis Development Strategy, the MNDS. So although the government didn't intend to demolish all the farmland sites, but the farmland would be severely destroyed under this scheme. So this threat is there. Another case is Pink Corn in Shenzhen. This is an idle farmland. So this farmland is difficult to rent, but it's of high quality. Because 2 years ago, the government they relaxed brownfield expansion, and so this which Pink Corn under threat. So the government mentioned that they wouldn't allow the damage before development, but to convert such a farmland uh, uh, into somewhere else, there would be a damage as well. So we see some difficulties here. First is statistics. It's not enough to only talk about theory. But in Hong Kong, there are limited farmland surveys. Because farmland surveys are rare in Hong Kong. But then, some time ago, our departments conducted a survey and took the initiative. This was a difficult issue, but then we finally got the approval from our seniors. And we are pleased to find many other supporters of farmland. There are organizations joining us in survey, like the professor from CUHK, who supported our agricultural study. And there are other few partnering organizations as well, such as the Hong Kong branch of WWF and Hong Kong Bird Watching Society. And lastly, we also worked with library research. So although we have limited resources, we have networks to put into practice a similarly infeasible survey. So how did we study the farmland? Firstly, we calculated the farmland area and how to divide this farmland size. Would it be half active farmland, idle farmland, or unfortunately, farmland destroyed by brownfield? According to online data and on-site study, we produced reports. And we also held a seminar according to our reports, which sparked attention from the public and the media. And we hope that these reports could serve as reference for the governments. This picture shows our views on agricultural land. The right picture is from the United Nations about urban-rural integration. Many people would doubt if urban-rural integration is feasible. Actually, this requires an adequate understanding of community in rural areas and ecology there. And we need to integrate both different sides. And the left picture is about the diverse values of agriculture. Many people would think that farming is not an lucrative business. This is a fact, but does it mean that money comes first in our society? If we don't care about diverse values, the farmland would be overlooked. Farmland is of ecological value and is a beautiful landscape. It also can be used for leisure recreational purposes in the community. So you can see that farmland has real great potential. In the reports of the NMDS, the planning principle of the scheme is urban-rural integration. So I hope that this is not only a slogan, and we hope that the governments would really put this into consideration and respect the diverse values of farmland. So this is not only our view from Kadoorie and other organizations. This is globally important agricultural heritage systems from FAO. And this is international information. When many people hear of heritage, they will link it to culture. And actually, agriculture is part of heritage as well, because agriculture links water and soil and solar energy into integration. It has high ecological value. This picture is an example of heritage in Yunnan. In the past, Hong Kong had many similar terraces, but unfortunately had disappeared. There's only perhaps like 10 to 20% of farmland in Hong Kong, but should we preserve it or should we simply get rid of all of these sites? So let's talk about the main example of Chinese mainland. President Xi has also said that farmland must remain farmland and it must be good quality farmland. But why is farmland must be good quality? Because when people want to repurpose farmland, they would find many excuses. But high quality farmland is absolutely irreplaceable. Let's take an example. Some people say that farmland could be converted to built up areas, but it is a good idea. So lastly, agriculture takes like thousands of years to develop, but it only takes a moment to destroy it. Therefore, it must be judicious to put a decision. So let me hand over to Jianhuan.
Thank you. Thank you, Tsz Lam. And let's invite Kim Woon to choose my PowerPoint. So happy to be able to share the farmlands by the biodiversity or ecological value. I believe farmland also has this ecological value, which could be highly ignored by human beings, because farmland, besides producing food, stable food, vegetables for us, is also very important in our in the biodiversity of ecosystem. Since, as Simon has said, I've been doing research on mammals, different animals' roles in the biosystem, and why I now my research is on farmlands biodiversity roles is because of in 2021, the Hong Kong government has announced a mega plan entitled the Northern Metropolis Development Strategy. Yet the conservation measure only emphasize on wetlands and water birds, not much relates to farmlands. But actually, in this Northern Metropolis part or regions in Hong Kong, they still have a lot of farmland. Yet it was rarely mentioned. That's what we are really concerned about, and also what we be careful, because in farmlands there are many water birds. They are highly relied on the health of farmlands. So here is the values of the farmlands: agricultural, cultural, and ecological. For example, there are many cultural heritage in these regions. And today we would like to focus on the ecological value. And as you can tell, globally, the farmland diversity is in a very steep decline, especially farmland birds. as many people, they document in the wildlife field. So we always use the number of birds to indicate biodiversities in farmland. And in China, we have the largest share of the world's agricultural land. Yet, the biodiversity value of farmlands is also highly overlooked, and not many studies on farmland biodiversity. And also, the birds, like avian diversity in China's farmlands, is also very high. And coming back to Hong Kong, the Hong Kong Bird Watching Society has reported that over 77% of bird species is in decline, and they are the birds that their habitats is in the open country areas. For example, wetland, they are the open country. Wetland birds, they are the open country species. And recently, like WWF and also Kadoorie Farm, we've come up with report on the state of Hong Kong biodiversity report. And we discovered that more than 61% of birds, they are, and for those who highly relied on farmlands, the birds who that are highly related on farmlands, they are facing extinction. And many of them depends on farmlands for survival. Because they are facing like their homelands, their farmlands is being is facing decline. And we've been doing a research on the northern metropolis, and we initiated a systematic biodiversity study of selective farmlands in this proposed area. For example, we've chosen 9 specific sites, mostly in new territories. And we have been working on this project for more than 1 year. And this is the photo taken in Daibo Yin. As you know, the farmlands, they are shrinking year by year. So we can no longer see a very broad area of farmland. So in these photos, it's kind of quite rare that you can see patches, they are connecting with each other. And we have been working, doing a lot of field service, use photography, and also other methods. And we've been documenting more than 66 species that are they are of conservation value. And these are critically endangered birds. For example, to the left, the yellow-breasted bunting. And some other birds, like the Eurasia kestrel. They mainly relies on mouses on the farmlands, which they could also help us to control the numbers of mouses in the farmlands. And to the right, you can tell there's the ashy wood swallow. It's the third in the history of Hong Kong, the third time documenting this very cute bird. And yeah, so it's really because very few farmlands in Hong Kong. That's why we could seldom document this bird. And besides birds, we also document like frogs, butterflies, dragonflies, and other reptiles were also recorded during the survey. And after all these surveys, we would like to see among which areas are among the highest in the northern metropolis. And we came up with these 3 sites. They are of the highest ecological value. For example, the first one, Sa Lang wetland, and it's Zhao Tin Lei Ok. And these 3 locations, they have higher biodiversities, they have more bird varieties, and also and they have higher conservation values. And we've shared this data with the government. And you could see number 3 is the Zhao Tin Lei Ok. And yeah, if you like to check out the report, you could download it in the Kadoorie Farm website. And with this sandy rich wetland oasis, why it has higher, why is ranked the first in terms of overall ecological value? Because even though it's quite small, relatively small size, but it yields the highest number of bird species as well. And also dibotin, it has the high vegetable yields among all these places. And meanwhile, there's also some threats that we've discovered. First of all, is the loss of a habitat. As you can see from these photos, farmlands are often treated as land banks for development, and also the large number of brownfield sites scattered throughout our study areas. And it brings like leads this brownfield also leads to soil contaminations, and also pollutions from the pollution of the rivers, and also from the trash. All of these pollutions, different kind of pollution, it really it's very dangerous for our birds and other animals. And besides pollution, we also found the mist nets, and all this way presumably to protect crops from birds or bats, but actually it is illegal in Hong Kong because the birds and bats, they are protected because all these mist nets, it doesn't it doesn't only catch the flies or other insects, it also would catch the birds and bats, even though they are not intended to come and eat the vegetables. Yeah, so hopefully, just as Tsz Lam said, in mainland China, the Chinese government, they are they really pay very highly on the farmland. So we have to protect how many areas of farmlands are under protection. They are not allowed to be developed, mainly from the concern of food security. And it will really support these policies, will also support our ecological biodiversities and to protect farmlands' ecological value. So I would like to finish here without my presentation.
Thank you, Jianhuan. I would like to invite Jianhuan and Tsz Lam to have a dialogue. So the topic is about agriculture and ecology. So, and is this topic has many discussion points. So I would like to ask you, how do you feel your animals on farmland from ecological perspective? Farmland is home to many animals, but what attracts them, and how would farmers view the value of the farmland size? So let's invite Tsz Lam to talk about this first. I believe farmland is important because the governments have always talked about biodiversity, and there's a strategy plan for it as well. And Hong Kong farmland is home to many farmland dependent species, as I talked about in my sharing. When it comes to biodiversity conversation, we must not overlook this point. And during my study, and I saw some farmers using mist nets to protect their farmland from animals. And we also heard farmers complaining about animals eating their crops. So I believe farmland provides habitats for animals, but then it's unavoidable that there's a conflict between animals and humans. And how can we improve on these fronts and to mitigate these problems to facilitate the coexistence of both? So what do you make of it, Tsz Lam? I believe you have many observations to share. So about animals damage to farmland. So of course the animals would not come to the farmland, but there are rivers. And there are some animals which may damage the rivers. Because in sustainable agriculture, we have some ducks which are the enemies to the crop eating animal I talked about, but unfortunately Hong Kong has banned the people from poultry farming without licenses. So it's hard to practice some sustainable methods in Hong Kong. So I believe the governments could issue some useful guidelines on the use of environmentally friendly compost or pesticides. So there are wild pigs and cows on farm and cattle on farmland as well. Though and environmentally friendly to go about it is to use physical barriers because it won't harm the animals, but then it blocks the wild animals from entering the farmland. So, so the bound barriers may be quite heavy and sturdy to block these animals, but this could be hard to be built and create burdensome costs for farmers because farmers already have to afford have high rental costs. Is it possible for the government to mitigate this conflict and bears parts of the environmental protection costs? And then let's talk about the air-flying animals. So Jianhuan has talked about mist nests. And even in Kadoorie farms, we use nests. But mist nest has totally violated the environmentally friendly principle. So the animal-friendly nests would not would not harm the animals. Like the nest should not be too large. And the mist nest in the picture that we showed is nearly invisible, but good nets should have some color on it. I believe the government could take action to do some education and regulation. Like the government could request farmers to use particular type of nets in farmland. But the problem is that the government should hire some people to do the regulations and impose some penalties on the violators. I believe the government could do more on these two fronts. Yes, I believe so. And these are some suggestions. Like the government could hand out some subsidies or guidelines to farmers. This reminds me of fish ponds. Some NGOs use government subsidy to for the farmers to control the water level and for the rivers to be a better grading ground for fish. And then let's talk about farmland. If our farmers can avoid using mistlands or use the recommended nets, they could have some subsidy from the government. If this idea goes ahead, I believe it would be helpful. I also seen wild pigs affecting the crops, and I believe this situation is common elsewhere in the world as well. So I believe there could be more measures to mitigate the situation because farmers may not earn high income. If the government could provide more subsidies on this would be helpful. So just a point to add. Why would these policies be better carried out by the government? Because a farm is putting up barriers or nets in the farmland may not be practical for the small farmers. Building permanent fencing might not be a viable solution if the government regulate the farmland in a comprehensive way. The effect would be more evident. In my previous workplace in Yunnan, there were many animals which damaged their crops. They are the black bears in Asia black bears. So in winter, there's fewer food for them, so they would go down you to eat the crops. So they destroy nearly the whole corn farmland field. So the government there took out insurance for the farmers. The insurance company would insure the damage made by wild animals, like wild pigs and black bears. So if damage did happen, the insurance company would come to collect evidence and provide compensation according to the damaged area. Of course, there would not be a full compensation, but there's at least 50% compensation for the damage. So this mitigated the burden of farmers and promoted a more harmonious relationship between wild animals and farmers. So if your crops are damaged by the wild animals, I would also think about ways to go about this problem. I believe this policy can serve as some reference. So are there any interesting examples of farm or farmland with good ecology? I will talk about an example. Because in typo 10, I just talked about typo 10, and I will talk about Chunlong in Jianhuan, which is famous for its special watercress. But to be honest, there's not a large farmland in Chunlong, but it has a great landscape because it has wet farmland and Chunlong is built on mountainside. The farm is built on mountainside, so it provides suitable environments for watercress. Watercress has high yields there, and the environment there is ideal for growing watercress. So I believe this is a good example of farmland with good ecology. I've never been to a Chunlong, but I've walked past it. I believe I just dropped by it. I didn't do a complete study, but I could see many frogs there. Although our survey mainly focuses on farmland birds, but we also studied frogs. In typo 10, there are many frogs and And there are many, but there are not many amphibians. In water fields, there are already rainy seasons. I believe it has something to do with farmers' use of the fertilizers and the water quality.
And also in other areas like Gamtin in Vade, the numbers of frogs at night, they are huge. And in the same areas, in the same size of the areas, there's some farmland, they have higher population of frogs than the others. And if we really want to see it from the lens of biodiversity, we could continue to improve certain practice so that we could contain and attract more species, and maybe it is related to the farming practice of the specific lands. For those who use like pesticides or fertilizer, maybe it will affect the biodiversities on the farmlands. And but this kind of farmland practice and how it affects the ecosystem cannot be quite well documented or reported. But in there are some foreign countries where some certain practice like community support agriculture, they could receive some subsidies from governments, whereas in Hong Kong, there's not such a practice. But in Hong Kong, in this organic agriculture, and as like what Kim Won said, like organic agriculture, they don't use fertilizer pesticides. Whereas in Hong Kong, whether we could ask whether the biodiversity or ecological value they are higher in Hong Kong with organic agriculture. Even though I'm not an ecological expert, but I noticed that because most of the organic agriculture in Hong Kong, they cultivate new areas of land, which has less organic matters. So, so it doesn't mean that organic agriculture has higher ecological values because it depends on the quality of the soil in the land. So what's the correlation between farm agricultural practice and farmland ecology? We have to see it and examine through various perspectives and lenses. But in Hong Kong, there's not much agricultural policy to support um, the ecosystem, the health of a healthy ecosystem. But there's still a very established perception that for those who work on the land with their hands, they have a lower social status. And I agree with you that the more the traditional way or conventional way of agricultural practice in Hong Kong, they're actually more adaptable for our ecological habitat, because in Hong Kong most of the organic agriculture they're either done in greenhouses or agriculture that relies on higher technology, and especially and if you pay attention to my presentation, in that survey, the wetland, it ranks the first in the conservation survey. Because of that wetland, it it has dry land, it has wetland, it also had some deserted land. So the biodiversity is very biodiverse. It has many different kind of micro habitats. So the more diverse the micro habitat is, the higher the biodiversity of that area is. For example, there are some birds that they like to have inhabit in farmland, and some birds they like to inhabit in deserted land. So, and as Zeman, you asked, is there any examples of farmlands with a good ecology? I want to share a case in Cambodia, and in Cambodia, they have a kind of bird in a quite a big size. It's a very big, and its height could be as high as 1 meter long. And this kind of birds, they like to live in a paddy field. They relied on like the fish and also tiny birds, and some NGOs, environmental NGOs locally, they want to conserve a very traditional way of growing rice in their paddy field, so that they could um, preserve the bird and also this traditional agricultural practice. And they came up with a kind of a rice. They also brand this story centered around this bird, this special bird. It's a endangered species globally, and because of that, uh, the researchers they went there to do research on these birds. And so in that area, they conceptualized the story of these birds and also of organic traditional way of growing rice, so that they could sell that kind of rice in a higher price, which in turn help to support the local farmers. And this rice product, it has even run a very high reputed price globally, and they could be sold in a higher and more reasonable prices. And meanwhile, these birds they are protected. For me, someone like me who are bird lover, we would fly over there just to want to take a look on this kind of birds. So yeah, so this is a very good example, and it could also support kind of the local the ecosystem, and also to support the local tourist economic. And another example is in Indonesia. They put they also brand their local coffees around um, a kind animals. They grow the coffees under the forest where that the animal gibbons they grow, and they brand it as a gibbon coffee. And it's another example of how we could preserve a farmland where, and meanwhile also protect the local ecosystems. And as you these two cases I also witnessed in Taiwan, and in Hong Kong we also see some um, some cases like Jiwo. They also grow their own coffee beans. And in Hong Kong, I could say that there are more and more this kind of stories and examples. And like Jiwo, they are these cases. The case is supported by University of Hong Kong. And the the wetland case. Yeah, they have fish ponds, wetlands, and dry lands. And when we did the survey a few years ago, yeah. So there's another area in Hong Kong that they have more like a diverse land use. And there's some agricultural lands. They have they are more diverse practice, but in the yeah, but in development policy, they are not that highly valued. Yeah, so it's not quite authentic cases. It's more like um, it's yeah. So sometimes I feel quite um, sad. Yeah, after we read the news or after we read the stories, for example, in the new territories, we there are more and more farmlands that have been turned into the great use land. And you could see this trend as if you see a fire picking up in the mountains, and you can see the fire coming closer to you. And when you say to your friends or your friends around, you say, "Oh, the fire is coming," but no one really pay attention. Not even no one, maybe even no one believe you. And what about you, Kim Woon? Do you have similar feelings? Yes, I also see this trend. Like for example, more and more brownfield sites being developed. Like when I do my surveys, I also like to talk with farmers. I want to ask them. I like to ask the farmers because most of the farmlands they don't own the land. They are only um, um, and because most of the landowners, they don't want to lease the land for long term because there might be a chance that the government will come and buy off your land. That's why the shorter the lease is, the more chance of the more profits the landowner could make. So when we see some deserted land, we will ask the farmer why it's deserted, because then they say, oh, the landowner, they don't want to lease the land to us, but they all don't want to work on the land. So that's why they just leave the land empty. They're waiting for the government to take over the land. They take back the land. They don't want anyone to farm on the land. Whereas in other areas, for example, Sa Lang, and some of them, they used to be farmlands.
So some people heard that there's developments, and then they surrounded an idle farmland and put soil over the land. So they might do this to show that the farmland belongs to them. The farmland was a beautiful one, but after such damage, it was incredibly difficult to recultivate it. It was such a pity. So are there any agricultural policies to prevent damage to farmland or agricultural land for other purposes? There are regulations in place, but not carried out properly. Early this year, there, there was an idea of consultation on agricultural priority area APA. If farmland can be included in the APA, and they would bring positive outcomes. But then the government hasn't published a timetable yet, and they didn't include beautiful farmland like Chunong and Daipotin in APA. So this puts some limitations in policy. But if these policies can be properly carried out, it would mitigate the issue. So about the illegal dumping issue, are there any policies to prevent damage to farmland? There are indeed some, but I don't see a clear logic between these policies. There's a guideline if um, the dumping of waste over 1 cm is illegal. So does it mean that the illegal dumping of waste below 1 cm is still legal? It doesn't make sense. In terms of agriculture, there's a better indicator that is topsoil. Pink corn has good quality topsoil because topsoil is an objective indicator, it's visible. So if we want to assess farmland, we don't have to talk, we need to see if the farmland is disrupted. So it seems that some people do some insensible actions to a farmland, but the government still somehow allow them. And those illegal dumpers, sometimes they didn't clear the waste, but then they just grew some some grass on the farmland to compensate for the damage. But thank you for your sharing. So I believe this has brought some discussion points for the topic, and we could see different agricultural practices can promote agriculture. And thank you for your sharing. In chat box, there are some questions for the two speakers. If you have more questions, welcome to type in the chat box. And we hope to cover as many questions as possible. So a question is about our work at KFBG. So after the farmland survey reports, what will Kadoorie do? We conducted two farmland surveys. The first was by Jianhuan. So we published the reports on biodiversity. But what's the reports provided some statistics for citation. In Kadoorie, we have a program, so-called environmental assessments. They would look at the government's development schemes and propose suggestions to mitigate the impacts of developments on ecology. So our reports data would be very useful for them to make suggestions. Like, would these developments affect the farmland? And then I believe our colleagues will make reference to our reports and cite the data and to support our suggestions. The reports has been supplied to many government departments. The report contains recommendations on ecology, and it has been shared with many government departments for reference. So, apart from doing policy survey reports, we would also like the public to have a greater awareness of ecology over the past few years. And after doing the farmland survey, we will hold an eco festival every February to March. This will promote a public awareness of farmland conservation. So we have many promotion, and we hope that more people, not just farmers, will be aware of the ecological value of farmland. We hoped that the public would support the conservation of farmland, and this is something we've been doing. So for my farmland survey, we provide some statistics on farmland and the types of farmland and serve some purposes. So first, we held seminar to spark more discussion in society. The past seminar has been attended by over 200 people and some press members. And about the consultation on APA, we've provided some advice on the governments on the APA with reference to the data, to the concrete data and experience from our study. So this is how we expressed our views to the governments. in Hong Kong, there so apart from my survey and Jianhuan's survey, there was a gap in farmland study. So many environmental organizations which quotes our survey statistics when they do study. And many books on agriculture also cites our data. So there's and a Conservancy Association quoted Jianhuan's reports when they looked into the case of Xialan, the Sandy Ridge. So there are more and more organizations citing our reports data to make recommendations or to spark social discussion. So this is something we want to do. In the morning, I met Tsz Lam. We discussed the possibilities of exhibitions on farmland and the exhibitions on biodiversity in farmland. As we, and yes, KEP the scheme can think about this idea as well. So I believe that the report integrates the data and make it more visible. So I believe that this you will. So another question. Okay.
And our last questions. And as you had discussed what conventional agriculture could do to increase its resilience in this climate change context. So, yeah, so conventional agriculture, as I said in my presentation, Hong Kong's agriculture used to only grow rice. That is conventional and traditional sense. Like, for example, we only spend for the last couple decades grow vegetables. So what does it mean to be conventional agriculture? So I always emphasize water, light, and soil, the interaction between these few elements. This is what conventional mean for me. I'm not against high technology, but high technology doesn't necessarily mean to set up greenhouse or and yeah, but the traditional way or the conventional way of doing agriculture, it is still seen as a backward practice. But I don't mean that greenhouse is evil, but like in Kadoorie farm, we have 80 to 90% open land, and we only have like around 10% greenhouse practice. And it's difficult to promote a more natural or traditional way of doing farming, but still people don't pay much attention to this kind of traditional way of practice. So yeah, so what is traditional? What is a traditional way? Or maybe we could talk about ecological friendly in to replace the word traditional, or the soil friendly. And whatever we do, we don't do harm to the soil, to the ecosystem. And if our goal is for healthier ecosystem and environment, and when we try different agricultural practice, maybe we could examine from multiple lenses. So in permaculture, there's a word appropriate technology, and what and it appropriate technology responds to those who are very kind of techno savvy, that they only see technology as the future, as the only modern practice. But in a modern society and in this sustainability context, what is um, appropriate? For example, in coffee industry, if there's if we need to hand pick the coffee beans, it is very inefficient. So if there's some appropriate technology, some small scale, human scale machine to help to support coffee industry, that is more appropriate rather than no technology, not at all. Yeah. So what is sustainable? Yeah. So because limited of the time, maybe the last question. And today's theme, Love the Land. Uh, Sorry, Siemens' voice is cut off just now. Yeah, so she got cut off. So maybe she's asking the last question again. Today we are talking about um, the the coexistence between farmland and biodiversity. So if there's any cases that is there any agricultural practice that we could share with the farmers to have a higher yield, but also to protect the ecosystem? Is there agricultural practice? So, for example, for some new farmers, they could use they because in Kadoorie Farm we have some sustainable farming courses, so which is very good for fresh farmers, new farmers, if they could receive they if they could um, learn some sustainable farming technique, it would be very good um, for their farming career. But also with some um, very experienced farmers. And so for example, we could also use some attractors besides a mist net. Maybe we could use a certain net that they are, yeah. So for example, for the governments, when we prohibit mist net, could we also promote alternative practice rather than just tell the farmers that okay, no mixed net at all? So whether government could also offer some subsidies to support the farmers. What about Jianhuan? Well, first of all, So for mist nets, perhaps please don't use if you can, otherwise if you are gonna catch a lot of birds. So for me, because I'm not a farmer, I don't have any farming experience. Perhaps I could not share my personal experience, but from my observations, there's some farmland that because I could see there's some farmland that they have many frogs, whereas in the other land there's no frogs at all. So perhaps we could offer we could organize some learning exchanges between different farmers there so that they could learn from each other, learn from their personal practice. And as Tsz Lam said, yes, we are not against high technology. So as long as this technology serve our goals of sustainability and biodiversity. So for example, so if there's AI technology that they could identify the wild boars attacking the agricultural land, and then it might be able to emit some sound to chase away the wild boars. So this kind of practice or technology, maybe it could help because the wild animals they are very sensitive to high pitch sounds. The moment they pick up the sounds, they could leave immediately. So this kind of technology could yeah could support agricultural practice in a way that it could support the farmers, but won't be it won't or it won't harm the animals or ecosystems.
So we see that um, we that's another perspective to view the wild animals. They are parts of ecology. If you respect wild animals and join the course held by Tsz Lam, we would believe we would have greater insights. If you are interested in this topic and related topics, we have more talks in the future in November and December and October. We have three talks. Tsz Lam talked about permaculture in on 29th of October. There's a physical talk. I will be sending you a registration link. If you are interested, feel free to take part in it. And in October, to celebrate the 70th anniversary of KFBG, we've held a talk on Hong Kong orchids. And in December, we invited um, Botanic Garden from the UK and speaker from the KFBG to talk about how to cope with environmental challenges. So these talks will be insightful. So let's keep in touch and looking forward to connecting with you in the future. So Tsz Lam and Jianhuan, do you have any final words to the audience? So I believe the challenge of agricultural promotion is the little public concern and government concern on related issues. So because I am already mid, um, I've in my young years, I didn't expect that there would be more and more people joining agriculture. And nowadays, there are people without agricultural background with an interest in farmland and nature. So I believe Hong Kong agriculture is still living thanks to these young people. How can we support these young farmers? Well, I hope some steps will be taken. How about Jianhuan? I'm not an agricultural practitioner, but I understand that there are many challenges to Hong Kong's agriculture. But I hope that farmers can also appreciate the nature outside of their work, like appreciating the landscape and wild animals. Because I love bird watching and viewing other animals. I hope more people will appreciate the lovely animals on farmland and ha to have a break from their hectic life. Thanks for your hopeful messages. There are many ways to connect to nature, and thank you for providing two important dimensions. And thanks for attending this talk, and good night. Thank you. Goodbye.